Taking a new step, uttering a new word is what people fear most. Fyodor Dostoevsky. I probably butchered the last name.
Is that Dostoevsky?
Dostoevsky, yeah.
Yeah, there you guys go. See,
We're just cultured as much as you can be from Indiana.
yeah. It's just still blaming my mom for my not buying hooked on phonics for me. But we are against the grain syndicate. We also have the After Dark, but today we are the syndicate. I'm joined by my good friend Jason Roberson, Jason Theobald Scooby, who would be sitting in that chair all juicy, is sick. So I am Jeff Black. We have our producer, Cinema 83, Logan Hyder. We are a podcast, kind of been the last few hours we've been recording. So by the time you see us, our third one in a row. And
we're getting a little hostile.
Yeah, we're getting a little hot in here, especially after our last one, after books. That last 17 minutes went sideways fast. But today we wanted to discuss something that's different. It's a different approach to business. It's something that we feel is, I would say, a tactical equipping along with a strategical equipping for a business owner to walk away with today. We did a charity seminar here in Nashville, Tennessee, raising money for awareness of osteogenesis imperfecta for Vanderbilt, which does a lot of research for my bone disease I have. And Jason Roberson presented on a topic called Profit First. It was based upon book called Profit First. I'll let him tell you the title and everything so I don't butcher it anymore than I butchered that poor guy's name to kick off this podcast. But when I talked to some of the people that I respect who go to seminars, they said that his seminar was the most applicable in the broad range context, meaning that they felt like that they should have known that as a small business owner, even though you go into business as a health coach, because that one that we did was very health coach driven. It still would have helped them understanding the basics of how to run a business, because most people start business and just, I know when I did, it was cash and then Venmo. And I thought Venmo was great. And then they would run away from their Venmos. And I'm like, damn it. You know what I mean? So a lot of people said, you should really consider doing this on a broad base. And I thought, since we did this for charity, this would be a great one for you to share with everybody, since you have expertise out the ass with what your background is in business and what you've managed to do in your life and currently are doing. So with that being said, I want to say something to preface this. When we talk about this, I want you to understand I actually do this method, okay? This is a method that my accountant actually asked me to run. It is something that Robo knows that I run, and it is something that I 100% believe has given me advantage over my competition, because I have a big view of where the silos are of my company. Every piece of vertical integration has something that he'll explain. I have 17 accounts, and I have it funneled explicitly at 100% rate, so I know where everything is. And because of that, I'm a 100% debt-free company in the health and fitness field with gym equipment that Robo's seen that's top of the line. And I was only able to do that by understanding precisely where my numbers needed to be at all times. And I feel that this is a unique strategy that small businesses can scale with easy, because when it first started with me, it was the 3 accounts, which I want to get into that. So Robo, take it away, my man.
Yeah. So to start off, I want to build the baseline. What should your business be doing? What should it look like before you implement this? And what should you be doing as a business owner? So first part of when I talked to these business owners a few weeks ago was talking about the failure rate of small businesses. The odds are after 6 years, you're out of business. This crazy. Is a stat that comes from the federal government. It's just the nature of small business, and you can blame the economy. You can blame 1,000 different reasons. At the end of the day, the person who's responsible for the failure of their business is the owner. They're the ones who either time the market wrong as far as guessing what's going to happen. They're the ones who couldn't manage their expenses correctly. They're the ones who struggled to hire staff and maintain them. They might just be poor managers in general of their overall day-to-day organization. Whatever it is, it's the owner who is the reason a business fails. We can't point to outside things, because that's your job as an owner, to anticipate and to adapt. Ultimately, the reason I see businesses failing is they run out of cash. That's probably the most obvious one and the easiest one to understand. When they run out of cash and you ask, hey, where did it all go? What happened? I tend to hear a lot in my business, I don't know. They don't understand their books.
That's actually something I was going to ask you. How come a business owner doesn't know where their cash doesn't go?
You'd be shocked that the majority don't know where it goes.
Okay.
That's the crazy thing. So I've looked at books for hundreds of businesses, probably getting, maybe close to 1,000 by this point. I don't know. It all blends together.
That's what you do. Because I know you've talked a lot about it, but like what?
I sell small businesses.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. In my background, I was a stockbroker, worked on IPOs, did M&A, so mergers and acquisitions for a big firm, consulting in that field. And now I actually sell small businesses. So I take small business owners who want to find a new owner, retire, whatever it may be, and I find the buyer and help close the deal.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. So because of that, I review these books, I look at them and I see the same themes over and over. And so part of this talk at the seminar Jeff and I are discussing was simply about taking this knowledge, sharing it with the business owners so they knew, hey, here are the pitfalls I see. Here's how you're going to be better than 75 to 80% of the rest of them. I can't tell you how to coach someone perfectly, but I can tell you the basics of managing your business that's going to put you 100 steps ahead of where you would have been otherwise. And if you understand your financials, you tend to sleep better at night. If you don't, you worry because you have no idea what's going on. So it's better to have that knowledge, better to have a system in place. So, Jeff, I know you implemented this system. When did you implement it and what was the catalyst?
2019, I went to Arete. Ed Milet went on a rant on the stage, talk about how winter was coming and nobody was prepared. I was deathly pale on the car ride home, knowing that I was one of those people in the crowd. And I texted Allison that Monday, my accountant, and said, hey, I'm a little scared. I feel like, I just got the company. My partner had died, passed away fighting pancreatic cancer at 37. And I
business partner,
yeah. And I bought the remaining stock for $120K. So that was October of 2018. And, we fast forward to April of 2019 and the books weren't really good. I knew going into that. And I was always trying to account for X, and I hate algebra. Part of the reason I couldn't stand it is because I didn't know what X was. And I didn't like that. And in business, you're often not knowing what X is. And I was like, all right, well, what can I control? So I asked her, I said, is there anything I could do differently? And she says, yes. She says, you could try this method. You start these accounts and has you vertically integrate. So meaning if you're a gym, you have your membership account, you have your trainer account, the people who pay you rent, you have your supplement account, what your store makes, a bottle of water, what clothing, and you have these accounts. So you can start putting money in as you're getting paid, but you pay yourself first. The whole point of being an entrepreneur is to get paid. Now, what you do with your money is up to you. But once I did it, within about 6 months, I had a new set of eyes on the business that you said, true, gave me peace. And I didn't have a lot of money in the business, but I had a new way to look at it and go, okay, I'm behind. I need to catch up. And by the time COVID hit in March and they shut everyone down, I had already managed to get 8 months saved up between myself and the gym.
So that 8 months you were talking about came from?
Yep.
He had no idea how right he was about that.
Literally 1 year later, I was facing a stare down of holy shit. And, I was cool. I was really unique in how I approached COVID, but nonetheless, that would get off on a whole different point. But I've implemented it since then. It's only gotten better. And the best part is I now have another person inside the company who knows how to run it. So I'm even more hands off on it. And I have a COO or CFO who just runs it and checks it.
You're talking about accounts. You're talking about bank accounts, right? Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clear that up.
So the foundation to even get to the point where Jeff is now, and for Jeff implementing that system, is understanding what your financials need to look like at the most base level, because there are some assumptions, some guesses you're going to have to make early on when you start that. So first thing you want to do is a profit and loss statement. If you don't know what a profit and loss statement is, please Google it. It takes 2 seconds. There are 100 different ways, but think of it as it's the revenue of your business. So all the different sales methodologies, and we're going to use Jeff's Gym just because it's the easiest way. So let's say you have membership dues, right? That's one line. Then maybe you have t-shirt sales. That's a second line. Then maybe you have day passes. That's a third line. These are all the different buckets for which sales / revenue, whatever you want to call it, comes in. You have that total number. All right. Then underneath that, you list out all your expenses. So you might have rent, you have electricity, you have water, you have any sort of staff, you have any sort of software you use, maintenance on the machines, down to cleaning the bathrooms, whatever it may be. You list all the expenses that go into running that business. All right. And then you simply take the sales and you subtract the expenses and you have your profit. That's literally it. It's super simple to do. It's super simple to build. If you don't have that, you need to do that right away. Even if you're a one person show with 2 clients, you should be building a profit and loss in order to understand where you stand. Do it in monthly increments. So January needs to have its own profit and loss. February needs to have it. March needs to have it. April needs to have it. Once each month has it, and then you build it for a full year, you just do a yearly one, add it all up. Super simple. The reason you do this is it gives you insight, 1, into, are you even making a profit? How much are you making? 2, look at the expenses and you look at each month. Are my expenses in line? Are they going crazy? Is one greater than another? How do I manage these? Are there any that I can lower? It helps you start to really dig into that. And then the third thing is you also look at those sales trends. So you start to see cyclicality or seasonality in your business, especially if you have it over years, which I encourage you, if possible, go back to prior months and even build it into the past if you haven't before. But then you can see, hey, maybe memberships spike in January. Maybe they'll go down in the summer, whatever it may be. That's going to change how you manage the business. That's going to change when you incur big expenses that you're going to have to carry for a little bit versus small ones. It changes your perspective on managing it. There are a few steps that you take after you go through the profit and loss statement that you want to hone in on as well. The first is understanding what a fixed cost is versus a variable cost. So a variable cost in the gym environment is going to fluctuate based on the number of members you have.
Right.
So
yeah.
A good example would be Jeff has fob access for members. Every single member who joins has a fob. That fob comes at a cost. So maybe that cost is $2 per fob per member. And so every time a new member signs up, he has another $2 cost. That's a variable cost because it varies with the level of the sales or the revenue. The other side would be a fixed cost. Fixed cost is virtually the same almost every month. So a fixed cost would be something like rent. If you pay $5,000 to rent the space, that's a fixed cost. There are ones that, kind of go in between the two that are close, but water, it's going to be relatively the same amount. That's pretty much a fixed cost. Electricity, probably the same amount, relatively a fixed cost. Once you understand that, you can start playing a little bit with levers, which is, how do I get cost out of my business? Easiest way is to attack variable costs first. Why? Because if you make a small dent and you have 500 members and you're able to get $1 out of what it costs to have each of them every single month versus you just save $100 per month on rent, it's going to be a much bigger deal getting that $1 of cost out of a variable cost at a large level versus just getting a little bit out of the fixed cost every month. And then the last piece is track the hell out of this monthly. You got to have this down to the penny. And you need to be able to pull it up on the spot, which means you need to track this almost in daily. If you can't do daily, weekly increments, entering those expenses, adding them up, and you need to have a monthly P&L done by the 5th day of the following month. If you're not doing that, you're not doing your job. And that's part of how I used to evaluate companies, where if their accountant wasn't quote unquote closing the books by the 5th day of the following month, I knew they probably were hiding stuff or didn't really know what was going on in their cash. So Jeff and Logan, I know I just flew through that. Where do you think gaps are where people may not understand, or what questions do you have about the basics?
I'll be honest, I really understood it. I think that any book you read on business that talks about you getting entrepreneurship talks about a P&L now. You just have to understand it. It gives you eyes by business. I harp on you about stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing that I get, it's a pain in the ass. But without it, you don't really know what your company's doing.
Well, I think that was a great point you brought up. You're like, even if you're a one person with 2 clients, like it's still something, because and it makes sense what you're saying. It allows you to think about with more intentionality about the steps that you're making versus just kind of randomly shooting.
I know how, and this will sound weird. Because I'm in more of the health coach space. I've literally seen in my 19 years health coaches who don't even know their client books, couldn't even tell you the number or the dollar amount or the day that those people are due or anything. It's very odd to me. I'm like, no wonder you don't really do good.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Or
100%.
you have nothing to measure by it. P&L gives you a chance to measure.
That makes sense, and it's also like you're saying about it. You're not doing your job. It's like when you think about it, I'm like, yeah, it seems like that'd be pretty. I heard something recently that was like, something is genius when it's said if it seems self-evident, but you'd never thought of it before.
Yeah,
and that's the biggest thing is once you see it and you see the benefit of it, it changes the way you manage your business. So if you have 2 clients and you're going to add 2 more and you understand the difference between a fixed cost and a variable cost, you can predict really, really well exactly what it's going to do to your bottom line. If you don't understand that, you're guessing how much money you're going to make. If you understand that, you absolutely can get there.
In your P&L, you should put a fixed part about for your taxes too. And I have, because the reason I have that is written into, eventually this method works. You can have all these different accounts. One thing I think that every small business owner needs to have is one of these accounts for taxes.
Yep.
You're going to get hit in the mouth at some point with something you don't expect, and it's going to hurt. And if you got a little money there, it doesn't hurt as bad. And I think as business owners, we tend to get everything first, and then we don't understand that there still is a payback to come back at the end of the road. And that helps manage that and ease that burden and goes along what you're saying when you look at fixed costs. Like, you really need to think about that too.
Oh, yeah.
So I know you're about to move on. The only question about like what you actually said there, this may be the next thing, but you were talking about how much bigger of a difference it makes if you get the variable cost down. So how would you go about something like that?
Be
situational probably.
Yeah. An example would be, let's stick with membership at the gym. Let's say that every new member that comes in the door, you have those fobs, so you get a deal. And maybe you're buying, let's say, each fob as they come in, and you try and do some sort of bulk ordering to get that cost down.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
You know that you're going to carry a little bit of extra inventory for a short period of time, but when you extrapolate that over the year, you save money. Things like that, where now your cost, rather than buying each fob at $1, is maybe 50 cents. And although you put a little bit more money in at this point in time, when you extrapolate that over the year, you saved 50 cents per member.
Right. And then the whole key is getting the profit up rather than and cutting costs is the same thing as making more money. Right?
It is. I mean, cutting costs is just as important as getting your sales up, especially when you're first adopting this. If you're an established business and you didn't have that focus on expenses, then you absolutely need to do it. Another big one that I see all the time is these people start a small business and they'll go out and they'll be like, well, I need a $55,000 truck or, a $70,000 truck because I can take a loan against the business. And it's like, the hell you do. You don't need that truck, because now you're getting 10 miles to the gallon driving an F350, that you don't need. Like, all right, let's get rid of the higher gas cost. Let's get rid of that truck and get into something that's 15 grand that's going to do the job just as well. And on a side note, if you pull up to someone's house to perform a service in a $70,000 truck versus a little $15,000 to $20,000 one, which one do you think they're going to tip more?
The one that probably needs it more?
Yeah. Absolutely. They're going to look at you with a $70,000 truck and be like, forget this guy. And I can almost promise you that guy with the cheap ass truck is probably doing better.
So with the like an unnamed individual from earlier that we were describing, like that wants to portray the first thing because they think that that's what you're supposed to do, and it gives them credibility to pull up in a $70,000 truck.
Yeah.
You're basically saying that's complete. That's nonsense, basically.
Yeah. Show me any study that does that, and just think common logic and say, if someone shows up at my house in a $70,000 truck and they're trying to charge me twice what the other guy's charging me,
Right.
why would I do that? Because they have higher fixed costs. They can't make as much profit per job.
Right.
Why would I ever do that? I see it especially in really small businesses that are franchised, where the franchise will say you have to have a vehicle that's no more than 3 years old in this crazy wrap. And then I got Joe the plumber down the street who shows up in a pickup truck who'll fix it for $150, and that company's trying to quote me $400. Like, forget you guys. don't tell me that like you somehow have a better knowledge than this guy who's been doing it himself for 20 years because you have a fancy truck. Like he has good Google reviews. That's good enough for me.
And that comes back to like authenticity and being genuine stuff we were talking about earlier. But anyways, I'll get so curious. I'll go forever. But
if I see my financial advisor driving a Porsche, which I don't have one, I manage my own. So that's a bad example. But if you showed up and your financial advisor was driving a Porsche, he's like, yeah, we're charging you 1.5% on your portfolio. You're going to say, what the hell? Like, you're not worth that. You're not doing anything. You're just a sales dude, and it's all computer programs on the back end, which, newsflash, everyone, I'm exposing the financial industry. They all use the same damn models. But they'll convince themselves they're worth that. They aren't. They absolutely aren't. And it's just like if you're getting a portfolio managed and you're paying over 1%, no one's worth that.
Dude, I'm over here thinking like opposite. I'm like, fuck pulls up at Porsche, like, hell yeah, he knows a thing or two about this, baby.
He knows a thing or two about getting money out of your pocket into his.
I know.
So is that a learning moment that you say don't look into, like, don't prioritize those things as like if you're meeting with that person, right, and you see him pull up in that car, like it's kind of a learning thing that you're trying to say to people, like, listen.
As far as business is like, people go into business thinking like, in Jim's example, I'll use this because it's easy. I need the best equipment to win. I didn't have the best equipment. You knew that. Right. I chose to double down on cleaning and other things that I could control. Yeah. And then through that, I amassed the wealth to buy the nicer things.
Right.
And I think that that's what he's getting at. Like, if you look at blue collar, I'll be honest, like when someone shows up in like a big, enormous truck that like looks like it's been lifted and everything else, I'm kind of like, all right, I hope you're going to do some amazing work for what you got there. I better be very impressed. And that's honestly not the case. The best work I've ever seen was by my buddy's crew who showed up with these beaten up Nissan Frontiers for 2000. Crushed it.
Yeah, and that's really all it is. It's people trying to portray an image.
Exactly.
Why are they trying to portray it? Well, I want people to think I'm successful. Well, doesn't matter what people think. You can be successful. Honestly, I would argue you're probably more successful. You have more money, more tucked away. You're not getting more jobs because you have a nicer damn car.
Like you said something yesterday.
It just doesn't work like that.
I think it was yesterday. You're like rich people master the art of looking poor.
Yeah,
and poor people like master the art of looking rich. Basically.
Yep.
That's a really good thing to think about. You see like some of those CEOs walking around in like fucking hoodies. Like I've seen memes about that stuff all the time. Like the rapper with the $150,000 chain standing next to the CEO that's worth $2 billion. Who's got like a hoodie and a sweatpants on going to Starbucks or something.
That's exactly it. And that's where these business owners get out of control is they think, oh, I had a good month. I should go out and buy this. And it's like, all right, well, you just locked yourself into 6 years and $1,000 a month that you're losing that you now have to make up somehow. Is that truck really going to make it up? No, working your ass off is going to make it up.
I live lean for a long time and I still live lean. I draw a very low salary.
Yeah.
And I live within that. I think that that's something that business owners should do because I could tell you that if I lived even maybe $2,000 more a month than what I could, I probably have very different outcomes in business. And I think that people are so quick the moment they get the reward. And this is what Profit First teaches you. Once you see a bigger view, this is what changed for me. It made it me really go, oh, so there's like, this really covers a lot of things for me that I no longer have to worry about. And that's what I wanted more than anything. It made it so simple for me.
Yeah. And it's usually a moment like that, some sort of clicking that says, and yours was sitting there at Arte and hearing Ed Milet speak. I never really got out of control as an adult. And the reason being is my first job out of college, I made $200 a week and they let me eat out of the cafeteria at a not-for-profit camping conference center down in Texas. I lived in this little double wide with scorpions running around on the floor. Like it was not a nice place as far as where we lived, but it was a fun job because I liked the people I worked with, but I made no money and then went and worked in South Carolina and once again, made no money. But during that time, I adopted a dog. I took the dog back home to Indiana, took a job in Indiana. Dog got super sick. I had $5,000 I had managed to scrounge together in a year and a half and save up. And then I had also bought a car, which same car I drive today, I bought back then when I had no money. That's the irony of it. But my dog got sick. I dropped $5,000 into trying to cure him. Didn't work. Had to take out another $10,000 in loans to try and cure him. Didn't work. He still passed away. And I was $10,000 in debt with a dog that was I I got him when he was 6 months. He died when he was a year old. That, he passed. So I have no dog now. I have this car payment. And at that point, I was like, all right, I don't understand what I'm doing with money. I have all this debt. I think I bought my car for like 19 grand back in 2011, which was a lot of money to me. So you add that to the dog. So I was about $29,000 in debt. And so I took the first job I could get, and I was making 27 grand a year.
I was never reckless of money. What was we didn't have good books.
Yeah.
And I knew in my heart, I think business owners know it because I know the next slide up is simplified best practices. But we know in our hearts that we are not doing the best practices with our money and profit. And that was what was uncomfortable with the Ed Bylett conversation. Like I knew deep down that was some truth. Like if winter came, like I could get really hurt. And no offense, in business, there was nothing else I wanted to do than prove the list of 3 people in my mind wrong at the time that I was going to kick their ass and prove them wrong that I could do it. And so that was highly motivating for me to really change it. But it gave me peace. And that's why I tell everybody when you hear this podcast, you're going like, all right, well, let's get into the nitty gritty. You have to understand these costs. You have to understand the P&L or you won't appreciate what this system is really doing for you.
Yeah. And that's absolutely it. I mean, if I knew then what I know now, I would have managed that situation 100% differently. But I made those mistakes early. You learned it by sitting there and getting the fear of God put into you. Our goal with this is that you don't make the same mistakes we did.
100%.
Because it took me years to dig out of that. And as soon as I was out of that, I went back to school. And
80% of businesses are gone in 10 years. Odds are stacked against you.
Yep.
This is a competitive edge, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Listen.
So we'll jump into the next one, which is the best practices that you can have when you're managing a small business. So let's talk about the very first one. Do not mix personal and business accounts. Under no circumstances should those be the same. They absolutely need to be different. And we'll talk about setting up all the different business accounts, a profit first method, but at the very, very minimum, a personal account is separate from a business account. Do not mix that, because when you start mixing that, you will start to lose sight of what's an expense personally, what's an expense business-wise, and how you can manage it. Too many businesses do bank account balance accounting, which means the owner thinks I made a bunch of money this month. I'm in great shape. I'm going to go out and spend money. And then it slows down 2 months later. They have no money. They're scratching. They're putting everything on credit cards. It's a vicious cycle that just repeats itself. I can't tell you how many times when I asked to see a business's bank accounts as part of due diligence, I think I can count on one hand how many besides, really large one, we're talking 20 million plus, how many small businesses actually use multiple bank accounts? Maybe I've seen 2, maybe
That's
3.
the one thing so far I can be like, I have a business account. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Second one is we nailed it over and over already. Avoid debt early at all possible. Those monthly payments will kill a business faster than any other expense. The reason being is it's not generating revenue, then it's not something you need to invest in early. Is a car really generating revenue?
Funny story.
Probably not.
Remember my gym did not have AC for a while?
I joined right at the end of the summer.
Yeah,
where
I do.
You didn't
Okay,
have it.
I didn't have AC and I didn't have heat. Okay, so when members would leave, I looked at this point. I took a debt for 0% interest to put heating and AC in the warehouse, and it was $10,000. That's something where I knew that kind of debt would actually get me a return.
And that's it.
Yeah, but for example, to your point. Me driving a car with the Iron House wrap on it would not get me a return. What is up, everyone? Today I bring to you one of my favorite new ethics supplements, liposomal L-carnitine. You put this underneath your tongue. Now, I used to be a big fan of the injectable version. It's great for burning fat. It's probably my favorite thing I use in my competitors, but I get tired of shots. So my good buddy Jason Theobald Scoob developed a liposomal version for us that we put underneath our tongues. Works just as well. I take it pre-workout. It helps with energy. It helps you with burning fat. It has L-carnitine, takes the fat in your bloodstream. It helps take it to your mitochondria, the powerhouse of your cell, to be destroyed. It is a can't miss if you're looking for a bump in performance. If you're on TRT therapy, this is a little turbocharged, like I put a turbo on my Supra. You want to put that on your testosterone. Be sure to check them out. Relentless 10's the discount code. All we ask is this: they sponsor our show. They sponsor me as an athlete. Give their products a fair try. If you're currently taking supplements, I guarantee you won't be disappointed in what you achieve. All right. Let's have a talk. Men have low T. It is a phenomenon. Testosterone got such a dirty name for itself. But guys, vitamin T is here, and it's here to win for you. If you're curious if you have low T and you've been thinking about it, you're listless, you have depressive symptoms, you're just not really just who you used to be. Maybe you've lost some of that vigor. Our friends at Advanced Vitality, HRT.com, are offering $25 off your most recent blood work. Here's the deal. They're not going to push it on you because TRT therapy isn't for everybody. I've seen this before. But there's nothing wrong with getting a look underneath your hood, see what's going on, and getting a peace of mind. If your general practitioner has told you recently your testosterone levels are normal, you definitely want to call them because they don't know what they're talking about. With that being said, if you're interested in more, check out my website, brittletounbreakable.com. On there, you can see our sponsors, Advanced Vitality, HRT. Fill out the form. They'll be more than happy to give you your $25 off and do a consultation on your lab work. Just check them out. Sponsor our show. It's always worth checking into. All right. So I wrote a book about my life that's kind of maybe cool. I don't know. So I was born with a rare bone disease, osteogenesis imperfecta. Kind of got bullied in life and ended up finding bodybuilding. Along the way, I was massively depressed, suicidal, ended up attempting it, and then decided to live life free. Along the way, I used psychedelics to heal and solve for my problem that was depression. It is a raw journaling session. If you were to ever ask how to journal, read my book. It's a good way to understand what journaling would look like. It is a autobiography that can't resist being a self-help book. At brittletounbreakable.com, you can get the pre-orders. I'm shipping in April. Appreciate your support. Every one is signed by me, and I'll even put a little smiley face in there for you if you wanted to. Look, if you're looking to up your business, check out Cinema 83, Logan Hyder. He is someone that will help not only enhance your brand, but diversify your brand and your portfolio for what you can offer people who are looking to find more content from you in a field that is ever crowded. He will help you stand out. Check him out, Cinema 83.
So I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus at all, but when you look at our society as a whole, you see folks who make $250K who are living paycheck to paycheck. These are the same people who are small business owners who are showing up in these ridiculous trucks with these ridiculous clothes, showing it off, acting like they have the whole world at their fingertips, and they really don't, because one massive issue and they'll fall apart. It could be a medical issue. It could be some sort of, issue with the family. Who knows what comes up.
For a minute, I was like, wait, I feel attacked.
Yeah. Life happens. And so, plan accordingly, have that savings. Don't be that guy who just goes out and buys everything every time the bank account balance looks good. So that's best practice. The big one to keep in mind, on top of separating accounts, keep debt low. The third one is, whenever possible, collect payments up front. The reason being is, if you're trying to chase people down after you delivered a service, it is brutal. You can run after them to the ends of the earth. They really don't have that much incentive, especially if it's only a few $100s. Are you going to go and file something against them in court? No, they'll probably pay it, but they're going to take a while and do it on their own time. If you get it up front, then you deliver that service. You don't have to worry about it, or at least make it, you deliver the service, you're paid right at the end. The more time you waste trying to collect money, the less time you can go out and make more money. I know we have a lot of trainers who listen. This is absolutely key for you. Collect up front, automate the process whenever possible. Do
for
not
all business at this point.
for all business.
Yeah, no.
Stop taking Venmo. Stop dealing with those individual transactions. If someone wants to pay you cash, great, as long as they're doing it in the moment each time and not pulling it up. But whenever possible, automate it. And if it's some sort of subscription, like they're paying you for monthly training, get that out of their heads. Make it super simple so it just automatically bills and it sends them a receipt. Jeff, I think you converted to this system a couple years ago after years on Venmo.
Yeah, and that was just because I had no other choice. My CFO was like, "You've grown up as a businessman now. Congratulations." And waited. And the other thing was this: she pointed something out, and she wasn't wrong. About a year or two later, it came out that they were going to make you show your on Venmo on your taxes.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Eventually, it's coming this way." So I just was ahead of the curve. And I'll be honest with you, it's less stressful as a business owner. I think, when you're trying to always account for X, you're always going to be frustrated by X. But if you can at least have some variable look at it, like at least like if it varies a little, but you at least kind of know, it's better. That's why I think at least.
So can I just ask, and obviously I'm laughing because I still do Venmo. That's why I'm laughing, and we've been talking about that lately. But is there like a particular service or system or what is the word I'm trying to look for? Like software that you would recommend for this kind of stuff, like to handle payments and handle invoicing and that kind of thing? Is there anything you go to?
There's a funny part to this, and Jeff knows it, and it's at the seminar. That was the exact first question I got asked.
Gotcha.
It's industry specific, what works best in your industry. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert. And so my recommendation is usually find other people who are ahead of you in that industry and just ask what they use and what works well. Get a couple reviews and then have some conversations with the vendors. See what works. The biggest thing is if you hop on their platform, if it's intuitive, if it works easier for you, if it makes sense, be willing to pay a little bit more for that. If it's something that's clunky, hard to use, but they're the cheapest, even though I'm talking about lowering expenses, if it's going to save you that much time, it's probably worth that little bit of extra investment to get a system that works a little bit better. Software, maintaining it, the servers, the upgrades, the bug fixes, all that stuff ain't cheap. So if someone's doing it super cheap, it's usually a red flag.
So when you get mad about like the 6% that they take or whatever, if it's a service that works very well, then it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. I mean, 6% is high.
Yeah.
So
that is high.
and I know you're making that up,
yeah.
but as just push back, and if at all possible, try and make it a fixed amount rather than a variable amount. Because if it's a percent that goes with each transaction, it's harder. But if it's a fixed amount where that you just pay for a monthly fee and then maybe they take a small percentage out when they do it all the transactions at once, it's a little bit easier. We're talking the personal training space. If you're doing individual services, individual ones, fight like hell to get that percentage as low as possible. It's going to suck. Your other options in situations like that are you can tell a customer, hey, listen, if you want to pay credit card, that's fine. It's a 5 or 6% fee. It's going to go on top of it, or you can just give me a cash or a check. I see nothing wrong with that. The reason being is you're saving yourself money and you're saving the customer money. Perfectly okay to do something like that. But if you're sending out that Venmo request, sending it back, it's really hard to track that. If you're taking a check and depositing it in the bank account, in the revenue account, it's a little bit easier versus trying to track all the Venmos, especially if you get multiple at once and you're sending them over. Do you send them over individually? Do you send them over all at once? It just gets confusing.
So it's tracking mostly and like a professionalism about not using like a kind of a lower end service like Venmo versus like a real payment processing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using Venmo too, there's times where they recognize it's a business and there's a fee involved,
right?
As well.
Yeah.
That's where if you can get to cash or check, something like that. If it's one off and you're doing regular services, or you just need to pass that transaction fee on to the customer and let them know it's the cost of doing business.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, they go up about every few years because I'm at that point where probably in about a year or so, I'll have to look at like an extra $5 here.
Yeah,
and there.
passing it on a little bit. Yeah.
It just is the cost of it's either that or all good things you love die, and that's why I tell everyone
you just can't use it anymore.
Yeah. All those companies try and squeeze you left and right, and it really sucks. But that's where you're starting to see some co-ops who band together, and businesses will negotiate special pricing, saying, hey, we represent 30 businesses in the same industry. Give us special pricing to some of these big vendors. That's how they're fighting back. Now, I don't even know if that exists in the gym industry, but it does exist in some other ones. And so there is some benefit to being a member of industry association groups like that.
All you gym owners who want to unite. Yes, let's do it.
So don't worry about passing costs like that on, though. Like, you shouldn't be worried about the customer being upset about it, like type thing. Because that's
whenever business.
Yeah, when I thought about
give
it
them
before,
an alternative. And
okay,
then,
that's where you come in with the cash. Like, listen, you don't have to do it this way. That makes sense.
You can do cash. You can do a check. You have to pay me in the moment. But if it's a credit card, I get killed on that. And I can't take a 6% hit every time.
Gotcha.
Like, these prices are so I can continue running my business.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's not like you're selling a $2,000 purse or something, where they know you're making stupid margins. They have no idea what margins you're making.
Right.
Yeah, most businesses don't make the margins people think.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the actual profit first method. We've dangled it a little bit. We're going to dive in.
Suspense.
Profit First is a book written by Mike Michalowicz. Mike Michalowicz, I know I'm a big fan of. Jeff's a big fan of. When it comes to tactical, applicable advice for small businesses, I would argue there's not a better author out there currently than Mike. Mike developed this system of financial management for small businesses that's based on how you manage your bank accounts. That is very thought-provoking in the way that you have to handle your finances. You're going to look at them in an entirely different way. I know Jeff teased this as well. He also has great books on marketing plans, great books on automating things, great books on slowly getting I would, what is it? Getting the weeds out of your business? Is that a good way?
Yeah, the pumpkin plan was more about like, sometimes you have to kill the bad ones to be able to grow the best pumpkin. And oftentimes in business, Robo's real bad about this. He'll be like, hey, I got a business. I'm like, my one main thing is my one main thing.
Yeah.
But he wrote a great book called Fix This Next, which is about breaking bottlenecks in companies. Can't recommend that enough.
Yeah. So Mike is amazing. All his books, I've yet to have one that's a miss. Yeah.
Mike, if you're listening, come on, buddy. We'll fly you out.
Let's do it.
He has his own podcast as well. He does speaking events all around the country. So I'm not going to regurgitate. When you go down this rabbit hole and you look to implement him, you need to read his book, listen to his materials, look for an accountant. So he actually has resources for accountants who work with his method that you can look up. That's another great thing you can do is you can find an accountant that's on board with this method matched together as well in your area. So all great processes. But the basis of this book is that you pay yourself first. So you're going to have 5 accounts, 5 bank accounts. You're going to set the first 5 up all at the same bank, and you're going to have one account that's solely for the income. So this is for everything that comes into your business as far as sales and revenue. Pretty simple. The next account that you're going to have is going to deal with the profit in the business. So that account is initially empty, right? Next account is the owner's compensation. So what you pay yourself. Again, next account, empty to begin with. Then you have the tax account, and then you have the operational expenses account. So you have 5 accounts in total. You have just the sales and revenue on one side, and then you have the profit, then you have the owner's compensation, then you have the taxes, then you have the operational expenses. And what you want to do is you want to look through some recommendations first off in Profit First, but you also want to look through your past financials and say, all right, in the past, how much was I incurring every single month in operational expenses as a percentage of sales? And what you'll do is you'll take that percentage and maybe add just a little bit of extra fluff on there just to be on the safe side. And when you get that revenue into the income account every month, if it happens all at once, you can do this right after. If it's over time, within the month that you get sales, so maybe you sell every single day, you get deposits every single day, do this twice a month. But you'll want to take that set percentage to cover all the operational expenses of the business over and just move it straight from the income account to the operational expense account. You look back historically and see how much you've been charged in taxes. You take that percentage of, the revenue that you had, maybe add just a tiny bit of fluff at the beginning, and you move that amount over. So if it's 15%, you move 15% of the overall sales that you had that month into the tax account. Then you look at the owner's comp and you say, how much do, I make? How much is needed in that? And, in order for me to continue living my life and get the pay. And so if that's, 20% of the overall income, you move that over. But here's the trick. And here's the most important part, the profit. So you need to stop thinking about all these different accounts as I need to satisfy these before I pay myself. Before you move a single dollar into the tax, the OPEX, or the owner's comp account, you need to move something into the profit account. You can start small. That can be 1%. That can be 2%, whatever it may be. If you look in the past and you've been wildly profitable every year, you can move a bigger amount, but start small initially and move 1% over. What you're doing is setting a habit to pay yourself before you pay anything else. And what that does is that instills a discipline where you become more focused on controlling expenses. You become more focused on controlling overall operations of your business in order to maximize the payment to yourself before you consider, hey, I want to get these fancy computers. Hey, I want to get these, fancy magnets to stick on all the cars. If you're, doing that at the cost of paying yourself, you're running your business incorrectly. And so reframe and think, I pay myself first, and then I worry about everything else in the business. And when you do that, you shift and you bring your expenses into line really quickly without realizing it. It's that discipline. Now you do this for a month or two, you see how it's going and see, all right, can I start adjusting these percentages? And as much as possible, during this process, you're slowly trying to bump up that profit each month. That's the key. As you bump that up, you get more and more discipline in your business. Some you might get, lucky because you have growth in the business, but if you're stagnant, you should still be able to bump up that profit, and you should still be working to pull out as many expenses as possible in order to execute for the clients, but maximize how much you're taking home. So at a glance, at an extremely high level, that's the initial part of profit first. So before I get into some of the nitty gritty on what you do with 2 extra accounts, I want to stop and say, Logan, I don't think you've ever heard this before. So tell me, what doesn't make sense in what I said?
The only place where you kind of, or the question that came up first is that when you're talking about paying yourself first, I've heard that before for sure.
Yeah.
But you're saying that gives you discipline to keep your expenses down. And I guess I would think about how, I guess that's how you build the discipline, I suppose. But would you ever run into an issue with that, like a person paying themselves out too much beforehand? Or I guess you wouldn't be able to do that because you're thinking about the expenses on the back end too.
That's what you need to look in the past and see what you've done previously. So that's part of it. And then you start low and you work your way up. So I'm not saying go in there and you allocate 20% of profit and say, all right, I got to figure out how to fit the rest of this to cover the expenses, my taxes at year end, and what I need to make. No, start at 1 and then slowly work it up. You shouldn't be jumping your owner's comp because you have a little bit extra money from 10 to 20%, anything like that. Just slowly work the percentages up on that side while you work the OPEX down. And ideally, you might be able to work the tax down, maybe not. It just depends on your situation. OPEX is really where you pull it down. The other ones rise.
And then the profit account and that's the same account or a second account to the account that you pay yourself out of? A second account.
Yeah. So there's a profit account and there's an owner's compensation account. So owner's compensation is what you need to live on. And that one, I actually, prefer if even as your sales grow, maybe you reduce that one a little bit and try and live on the same amount you were before, the same fixed dollar amount. Because when you start bumping that up, you start getting used to a new lifestyle every time you make a little bit of money. And when that hard time comes, do you really have that fallback? Have you really saved enough? Or were you just taking that money and spending it in the moment? You lose that discipline again.
That makes sense. So the profit account is for the profit that the business itself made, but then you also have an owner's comp account that's for you.
Correct.
Separately. Okay. And when you're saying pay yourself first, you're talking about the profit account.
Yep, absolutely.
Gotcha.
You know my profit. You know what my owner's compensation account pays me for the Iron House? My 401k.
Yeah.
And that's why I choose to have it fund at a high level. And that way I know that I'm getting ahead, because you've taught me that, investing at a higher rate of interest. And the company is basically going to double pay me at the end of the day. So everything I invested, the company is paying me back, and I just further invest it. And I know that eventually the company is going to sell and I'll get this amount, and then I have all this money I've already invested over here. So I'm basically double paying myself.
So you're saying with your owner's comp account, you put it right
I put it all in my
into your
401k. I'll look at it.
Gotcha.
So Logan and I were talking about this briefly just a little bit ago about taxes, just in general. And what this also does is it
criminal.
sets aside the money
They're criminal.
for your taxes ahead of time. So when you get to year end, you have the amount to pay. It's not as though, oh crap, I'm going to have to reach into my pocket and now write
what I'm
this
saying.
check.
That
money's
huge.
already there. And it changes your mentality. The next step in the profit first method is that you set up 2 more accounts. The trick is these are at an entirely different bank.
So you worked up to 17 accounts is what we started this
Yeah,
with?
it's like roughly 17 accounts. It might be 14.
That's
but
crazy.
So one's
There's ways that you
so
can.
so one's a vault.
Yeah.
That like pretty much houses stuff for the future. Another one's like future equipment. So
Gotcha,
like they might be high numbers, but not all of them. Like some are 1%, 1% threes.
specific.
That's what I'm saying. When you get with this, you could really scale your business in a way you couldn't see before, because you're seeing it at it's a different way to look at a business.
Right.
And I don't want to steal too much of Mike's thunder. I'm not even sure if it's okay how much I talk about this. And so
He
buy
says he
his book.
loves hearing about entrepreneurs. It's worked for us, so therefore we qualify to be able to talk about it.
Buy his book, please. But Jeff hit on a couple things, which is this is a customizable thing. It's not a one size fits all. So I'm going through the 5 basic accounts, but as you get more into the system, you'll realize, for example, Jeff has a gym. He's going to need new equipment, so he should probably set up a certain amount for an equipment account that is allocated there, and then he can replace that equipment over time, and he can go back and look at, all right, when has my equipment failed? How often? How much do I spend a year per equipment? And just set that aside so it's ready to go. So it's never a scramble.
I'm a head on marketing. Google always changes the SEO, which is why I'm learning it. Social media has always changed algorithms. You have to inject money at different points. This allows you to be able to have that money to inject. Here's the deal. If you really want to win in business, you're going to look for every advantage.
Right.
And this is an advantage when you can see your money and how it really does it work for you. You're willing to make it work for you.
You were talking about something earlier, the checklist thing, and the thing that came to mind, which makes me think about this, because like when you were saying the 17 accounts, and you started explaining it, it's like I know this is a way to like do what you're supposed to do and make it simple, but it's kind of like making my head spin a little bit. But it's what you're talking about with the checklist. It's like the discipline equals freedom idea, right?
Yeah.
It's like once you get the system of discipline, and it actually frees you up quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you can go further and have a payroll account within your OpEx account, in whatever it may be.
Right.
But you're doing all that, and then where a checklist, might come in is you say, all right, I am going to do this on the 5th and the 20th of every single month. I think that's what's actually in Profit First. And Mike talks about where it's on the 5th, I'm going to, move everything into these accounts based on the percentages. And then on the 20th, I'm going to do the same thing again.
That's what you're talking about.
And you
Doing
just
it
do
twice
it
a
over
month.
and over.
Okay, so you hit all those percentages and all those accounts, but you do it at like very specified times where it all goes out at once.
Correct. You're not trying to do that every time someone
Okay.
comes in. You're setting specific times, and it's going to depend on your business what makes sense. So if you're getting everything once a month, there's really probably not a need to do it multiple times a month unless you're really bad at discipline. You can probably do it once a month, but if you're getting funds throughout the month, maybe setting up twice a month makes more sense.
Makes sense. Gotcha.
Yeah. So we have the 5 accounts at the one bank is where we stand right now. And we're talking about the 2 additional accounts. These 2 additional accounts need to be at another bank entirely, completely, disconnected, unrelated to that first bank. So, Wells Fargo and Bank of America or something like that, whatever it is. Those 2 accounts, you need to have one that's a profit hold and one that's a tax hold. And here's a trick. So those first 5 accounts, when you move the money in and you start to see that tax account go up and you start to see that profit account go up because you're not pulling it out to pay expenses, you're not pulling it out to pay yourself, those accounts can start to look really tasty. You want to get that temptation out of you.
Get that away from your eyes.
Exactly. And so what you do is you go in and when those funds go to those initial accounts, great, it's separated out. You need to take those funds and send them to the other bank. So it's out of sight, out of mind. You don't even think about it. So, let's say you have the 5 accounts at Wells Fargo, then you have the 2 at Bank of America. So you move $5,000 into the profit account at Wells Fargo, send that to the account at Bank of America. Same with, maybe you have $5,000 in the tax account, send that to the account at Bank of America. And then you don't look at the accounts at Bank of America besides just to double check it's okay. You're not touching those. You don't get checks on them. You don't get credit cards on them. If you want to get into those accounts, you say, hey, I need to walk into a branch and get them to write me a check. You make it as difficult as possible to access that money because it's that discipline piece. Now it's out of sight, out of mind. It's set away. You're not going to think about it, but it's ready to go.
I'm going to give you, remember how I asked you about money markets?
Yeah.
So this is when I actually hit the 2 point. So what I did was I went and got Discover's at 4.21 interest, and I got Ally at 4.25. So Discover holds my taxes, Ally holds my actual profit side. I put them in money markets because you can only get 6 withdrawals a month before it starts impacting you. And you have to send it by Zelle, and it's kind of a pain in the ass for me to actually go through it all. So what he's getting at is 100% sense. But I chose to put him in those accounts because those are kind of my off accounts, because I get another account that I'm getting like my money off of, that I live off of, the operational one. Those are accounts that actually earn higher interest than what would sit in a checking account or a savings account. And since they're away, I chose to go there with my money because I knew it was a pain in the ass to get them back out. It hurt me with fees, and I'm actually going to make more money than what was sitting in a bank. Wrong thing to do, or was that the right thing to do in this model?
I mean, I think if you're disciplined enough not to touch it and you're okay with it, then yeah, make some interest. Hell yeah.
Yep. Nope. There you go. That's just one angle to look at.
A book, Atomic Habits.
Yeah. James Clear.
Yeah, James Clear. He talks
Great
about
newsletter, by the way.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, it's like 2 billion readers or something crazy like that. But one of the things you just brought up that it sparked my mind about that is like adding obstacles. Like in that case, you want to add as many obstacles to looking at or touching that money as possible, so that you don't. You know, like if you make it difficult, then you won't mess with it.
I mean, we talked about this yesterday. We shot the episode on porn addiction for After Dark. We talked about what are ways you think of stopping it,
obstacles.
and that's where I talked about, hey, make it as difficult as possible to access it. This is where my mind pulls that from.
Interesting.
It's the same idea. Now, it's going to depend on what you do. When those funds are at the other account, obviously the taxes sit in there until you need them to pay your taxes. Yep. The profit, on the other hand, Mike has viewpoints on how you should take some of that, how you should enjoy it once a quarter, a certain amount. The rest, maybe some gets tucked away for a rainy day, whatever it may be. Read through the book, decide what works for you, but do not just go out and blow the profit every time you see it in there.
Account.
Yeah,
gotcha.
You need to have a plan for that profit, what it's going to do for you, where it's going to get allocated. And I agree with him. I think he said only just take 1% out, maybe go to a nice dinner or buy yourself something nice.
So would that be like
small.
An owner's compensation that you're doing in that case? Like if you took
It's different.
Owner's comp is what you pay yourself to live off of. Profit is the actual profit of the business that
you can do like whatever with.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you should use it for more purposes than whatever and paying yourself. Right. That's where you should, use that 1% for, maybe having a good time or 2 or 3, whatever it may be. I don't think it's a big deal to use a small amount, but that needs to be, set aside for a rainy day, or maybe you have a big goal down the road where you want to buy something and combine it in. Whatever that is, you should set a plan for that and then watch the money build towards that goal.
So when you talk about owner's compensation, money to live on, you're talking about like to pay your bills, like literally money to live on. And then if you're talking about anything extra, that would come from your profit. Is that what?
Yeah. I mean, so let's say your owner's comp, you need $6,000 a month to live off of, to cover your bills, to cover basic necessities, what you need. Yeah. That would be what that would be. That's owner's comp. And then profit is in addition. So let's say in a month, your average operational expenses are $20,000. And then let's say you have to put aside $5,000 for taxes, $6,000 for, your owner's comp. So that's $31,000, right? Yeah. Everything over that really ideally would be profit and going into your profit account.
Gotcha.
The trick is you can't think of it backwards like I just said it.
Yeah.
You have to think about, all right, I made 38K. I want, 38 is a bad number. We're going to use nice round numbers. So I'm going to say,
where the hell
10,
yeah,
10
I'm going to say 40K.
40, okay.
And I want 10% to go to my profit account. Great. So that's 4,000 off the top. So I have 36,000. All right. Now I know I need to pay myself $6,000 to live. So that's 30. Then I know I need 5K for the tax account. So that's 25.
Okay.
So that means my op expenses need to be 25,000 or less. Otherwise I'm mismanaging my business.
Gotcha.
And I need to get expenses out. And that's where you start to see, oh crap, my operational expenses are 32, 33,000.
And I only have 25.
Yeah, and I only have
Gotcha.
25. I need to drastically change how I'm running my
Gotcha.
business.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's the discipline. Think of it as you go out and you're eating a meal. They always tell people who are trying to lose weight, don't get the big plates. Get the small plates because it's smaller portions. It looks fuller. The difference is not only are you getting the smaller plate now, but you have, the mashed potatoes, the whatever, it's steak, the vegetables. Start with the vegetables. Those are going to benefit you technically, and it's a bad example because but you get the idea. Yeah. I have someone who's a health and fitness expert
Sitting
at
across
me
from me.
because
He said, "Now watch how you structure that meal now."
Yeah, I don't want to get too far, but it's the idea that eat what's good for you first.
Yeah,
even
that's
if you
what he's
don't like
getting
it.
at.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I started to rethink that analogy. I was like, shit, am I saying this right? Because steak's actually
No, you
really
really
good
are
for you too.
because it's 100% true, and that's what I'm trying to say. When you look at a business, you don't realize the animal it's become until it's already hurt your feelings.
Right.
And then once it's hurt your feelings, you're like, well, shit, I need an answer, and this is an answer.
That's what we were talking about earlier. I was like, I would rather learn. Like the saying is like smart men learn from others' mistakes and wise men learn from, or smart men learn from their own, wise men learn from others. Yeah. So I'm trying to, that's what I told him when you went over there. I was like, dude, I need to learn this because I just don't want to be in that position. It sounds terrifying.
Yeah. And by no means should someone listen to what I've said so far and say, I'm going to go implement this today. If you don't read the book, you failed. Like you're not going to do it right. I can't do it justice in, a 20, 30-minute conversation. You need to understand the methodology behind it, walk through his examples, read the book 2 or 3 times. And then ideally you get an accountant on board who is going to be right there along with you. You can do it yourself. No problem. You can learn that aspect. But you need to be able to explain to your accountant what you're doing at year end, or even, if they're helping you out manage that. And if they're not on board with that plan, they're going to look at it like it's a foreign language. So we went through profit first, and I can't recommend enough. Take a look into the method. Take a look into all of Mike's books. Really see if it'll work for you. I promise you there's something applicable in every single book to your business in some way, even if you only have one client. You are a business if you have one client on your own and you're working for yourself. You don't have a boss. So never forget that, and go ahead and put that discipline in as you start and as you grow, because once you're big, it gets harder and harder to change the system, and you'll get more and more resistance, especially if you have employees. It gets really tough to start cutting expenses once you have employees.
You end up having to terminate employees.
Yep.
That's usually what happens.
Usually you overhire. It's also a mistake in a lot of small businesses.
Yeah, no, and that's something that even I've been going.
Or underhire.
I've never had a fire. But I've put myself in pinches by wanting to give people more money and help out, and then it kind of gets to a point where then you keep doing that, and that goes back to a previous episode we did, where I'm like, hey, look, a position only has so much worth to it, and at some point, if you want more, you have to create more. And this is one unique thing about Profit First. We keep going back to the point. You can really see how you could create more, or where you're not able to create more.
Yeah. So we're jumping into decision making next for business owners and talking through a lot of the faults I've seen, or a lot of the issues that come up regularly when small business owners are making those decisions, where they're dropping the ball most often. So the biggest one is they don't track anything. They don't track how many leads are coming in. They don't track their conversion rates. They don't track where those leads came from. We already talked about finances, so I won't hit that anymore. But they don't track any sort of information that they can go and harvest, figure out, where they got clients, how much it made, what their conversion rate was, to then apply it to their next marketing campaign or their next attempt to gain more clients, wherever it may be. I can't recommend this enough. Track everything. If you spent $400 on a Google ad, say how many clients you got from that, divide it by the number of clients, and all right, I spent $100 on this Google ad. I got, 1,000 clicks. Within those clicks, I got 2 clients. Maybe it's not a great deal if it was $50 a client, whatever it may be, but that's going to help you make decisions on how to invest the money for the future. A lot of people I see just out there taking swings at different ideas, and I'm going to jump in this new partnership and try this new thing, where they may have already figured out a successful methodology, but they didn't track it well enough to know. So they've already passed it by. They're in a never-ending cycle of learning a new process, trying a new thing, when they had something that works and they could have slowly tweaked it to make it super successful. Yeah. Next one is when you make those decisions, when you're trying to decide what that next step is, and try and make those decisions so that if you're wrong, it's easily reversible. If you have to make a decision, a big one that changes the course of your business, and it's not easily reversible, you should take a long time thinking through that. I think Jeff Bezos may have been the one to say that he makes irreversible decisions very slowly. He makes reversible ones very quickly. That's the way you should think about it as well. If you have that ability to change it back quick, get as much information as you can, get that, 90-10 view where you have 90%, known, 10% unknown, or even 80-20, and just go for it.
Don't do Colin Powell 70-30. That didn't turn out so well for Colin Powell.
Yeah, well, he was lied to. Yeah, he got asked to do a big favor for someone.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
You're talking about, by the way, knowing like 80 or 90% of the variables and then make the decision because you can't know 100%.
You're always going to have to have an unknown. It just is what it is.
And that's a big issue. So you have people who just jump and go at stuff without even thinking through it and just, throwing stuff up against the wall and seeing what sticks. Sometimes you get to that point, but if you do, it's not ideal.
Yeah, you're really out of options kind of at that point.
The other people get analysis paralysis and they want 100% and they want a guaranteed outcome.
That's more me. That's what we were talking about. It's like, because I don't know, there's so much I don't know, and I'm like, well, I'm just not going to do anything. Yeah. And that's not the right.
I deal with that all day long with business buyers where they get analysis paralysis. They're going to ask for every detail. They want to mitigate every risk. At some point, you just got to accept the risk and go.
Yeah. I'll be real with you. I think that in my business, I think in business, when you figure out what you're doing and you survive, there does come a point though where throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks helps you to figure out where you want to go next. Yeah. Right? Because as you start scaling, you start seeing all these doors start opening just by the sheer fact you have more money to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's something good about that. But in regards to it, like I went down a YouTube channel with my coaching team and found out it was not a viable thing to do because the setup we wanted to do just wouldn't work. And we would never have known that if we didn't spend like 18 G's to kind of find it out.
So the last piece on this, and then we're going to jump ahead to some of the common pitfalls.
I
actually like fitballs better.
You think about kittens beating each other.
But pitfalls when it comes to decision making, we'll jump to that next. But when you're making these changes, one change at a time. See what happens. When you make 5 or 6 changes, you have no idea what's going on. You have no idea what is impacting the business. You can't track them individually. But when you do one at a time and it's a reversible one, if it doesn't work, change it back, go on to something different. Just keep it simple. Track the outcome, move on when it doesn't work, but only one at a time. So let's jump ahead to the pitfalls, the most common mistakes I see. Not asking advice is right up there as number one. There are people who've been where you've been before. Now, I'm not saying they're always going to give you good advice, but if you ask 5 or 6 people who've been where you've been, who have that experience, and if you're an entrepreneur, lean towards entrepreneurs because they have a closer risk tolerance, they have a closer mindset. Don't ask people in corporate America who've never taken the step out. Rarely do they have a good idea for you. But ask advice, get ideas. And it goes back to, all right, if it's a quick decision, ask a couple people's advice, get what info you need, just go. When you avoid asking people advice and you do it on your own, it kind of goes back to our last episode where we talked on books. Or when you read a book, you're standing on the shoulder of giants. When you ask advice, you're getting all those people to help lift you up. Rely on them. There's a lot of people who give you a lot of great advice.
That's literally what I was just talking about. It's like I just didn't want to ask because I'm like, I don't want to admit that I don't know what I'm fucking talking about because I'm like, oh, I want to be a business owner too. It's like, well, I don't know anything about this. Well, you can't unless you ever
You are a business owner, whether or not you think it. You've been one for 6 years.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so it's like, listen, you need help with taxes. Ask for fucking help, dude.
Yeah.
Just ask.
Next one is a sunk cost fallacy. A sunk cost is, let's say you're deciding between two options and you're 2 months down the road with one option and you've sunk 30 grand into it. And you have this new option that comes up that looks phenomenal. And when you compare them side by side, let's say the option that you're 2 months into, sunk a bunch of money into, is only going to yield you a result of maybe 100K. The other option you're looking at is going to yield you a result of 150K. People get stuck on, listen, I invested 2 months and $20,000. I'm going to see this through no matter what. That is a sunk cost fallacy. Everything you've spent up to this point should not impact your future decision. You go with what's going to be the best moving forward. It's got to be unemotional. When you start to fixate on those sunk costs or the lost costs that you've already incurred, at that point, what you're going to do is you're going to start making emotional decisions. When you make emotional decisions, they're irrational, they're not based on fact, and they're not going to yield the best results for your business.
Because that is an emotional decision, right? Like I put 2 months into it, I have 30 grand.
Exactly,
you're already there by making that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Next one is failure to learn or a fear of change. Like anyone else, too many businesses keep doing the same thing forever. When you do the same thing forever, you're going to get the same results, but it's a law of diminishing returns. Maybe it kicks off and it kills it for a while, then eventually it starts to taper off. Either other businesses start to figure it out and use the same tactic. Maybe people just don't respond to the same way. Consumer habits shift. You have to constantly be tweaking, changing, and learning what's different in the business in order to figure out the best way to move forward. Yeah. Next one I see most often is opportunity cost. So opportunity cost, similar to sunk cost, but slightly different, where think of the opportunity cost as what you're giving up to go after another opportunity. So if I, had an option here to come record a podcast and my other option was to go play a game of golf, my opportunity cost is that game of golf because I came to record a podcast. That happens in business as well. Maybe there's a massive client that's taking, 50% of my time, and then the other 20 clients I have are taking the other 50%. Well, that one client might be costing me another 20 clients because of how much time I have to fixate and spend on them. So the opportunity cost of this one client is potentially losing out on all these other ones, which I'm a big believer in. If you have a terrible client, they're hard to work with, they cost a lot of money, you're not making that much profit, they're just really big on revenue, cut the cord. You can have that honest conversation, give them a chance to shape up and say, hey, prices got to go up. Here's our rules of engagement. If they don't abide, out, move on to other customers. What you'll find is that your best customers will refer other great customers over and over. Build your business around those great customers and serving them. It shouldn't be, 2% of your customers taking up 50% of your time. That's just not a sustainable model.
And that usually shows up in every damn business too.
Yeah. I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the mornings, have you had clients or in the afternoons that wanted your full undivided attention and you do small group training? We know that going in. Our first session is small group.
Yeah,
but do you have
to
ones
really
that
let them know early on that I can't sit there with them on I only take people who have a little base understanding. Like I don't have to worry about them as much. I'm trying to, those are the people who need just accountability, structure, things like that. And that's where in business, you have to account for all needs and understand what they are. Like that could be a whole nother talk, but yes, correct.
Yeah. And then, when I jump past that to, all right, how do I really make good decisions? There's two models that I really love. And the first is a sensitivity analysis. A sensitivity analysis, you can Google it. There's 1,000 different, articles, little worksheets probably to help you through it. But at the end of the day, it's all right. here's what I'm targeting. Here's what I'm trying to do. Let's say I'm trying to add, 100 clients with this investment. All right. Let's say, I only get 90 clients. What does that look like? Let's say I only get 50. What does that look like? And then let's say the reverse happens. What if it's, I get 120 clients. What does that look like? What if I get 150? What does that look like? So you start to get an idea of the best and worst case scenarios when you take a new sort of action. And based off of that, you can decide, all right, how do I mitigate those risks on the low end? What are the possible reasons that might dictate that I would miss this entirely? And then you start to work on those to try and lessen the risk, or you start to work on those in order to try and, create opportunities where you'd be able to shift quickly into a new direction. When you look at a sensitivity analysis, the most beneficial part to me, and I don't think this is probably written everywhere, is you find that worst case scenario, you make your peace with it, and you say, if this happens, am I going to be okay with it? And if you can make your peace with it, at that point, you're going to be so much more confident. You're going to fly into that decision and you're not going to regret it. If you never figure out what that worst case scenario is in your head, you never make your peace with it, you always have that worry in the back of your brain. And that's what I see most business owners do. They flew into a decision. They didn't think about the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario happened and now they're panicking. 100%. Yeah. The other one is I'm a big believer in reverse engineering. So, if you're trying to make 10,000 extra and you've tracked your data, what campaigns can get you to that $10,000 mark. So, you need to make a $2,000 investment to hit 10,000 in new clients. And then the additional cost that'll come along with that, with having those 2 clients. You can figure out what your exact profit will be. At the end of the day, revenue growth is great. Really doesn't matter to me. If your profit is growing, you're a good business. If your profit is shrinking, even if your revenue is growing, you're not a great business unless you're in the tech industry, and you're some sort of, pre-profit model. That's where I say, try and back into the number you want to hit and then figure out what that investment is. And that way you can take that action and it becomes, a little bit art and a lot science versus a guessing game.
Yes. I can't argue that.
Yeah. Do you use any other models or do you use anything at all?
Mostly reverse engineering. Like right now, understanding where I want to be, I identified that Google SEO was something I need to understand because it was something I couldn't reverse engineer into my business to understand it. So yes, I think that's the most applicable because your account, you're looking for, be like, I want to be here. Okay. Well, what were the steps? And as you go backwards, amazingly enough, you'll find out if it actually works or not the way you think it would, and then, cause once you start stepping forward with it, you'll find out very quickly if it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I've seen tons of different models from my time in corporate America, tons of different uses. Some are good, some are bad. They're all the same form of, hey, we bring everyone together, everyone puts us on there, then we start working through it and figuring out all the possible. And, on a small business, it just takes a lot of time. That's unnecessary. I don't think you need to do that. At a really big business where you have 18 different departments who participate in fulfilling an order, maybe those apply. At a small business, it's just clutter. It's just bullshit. Keep it simple. Make it as efficient as possible for you and have a bias towards action. That's the best methodology I can say is, figure out a way to move quick, because if you can move quick, you're going to be much better than your larger competitors. Smaller ones always have that nimbleness. That's almost always their competitive advantage.
And understanding that is your competitive edge that you could really niche down on and really grind. I know you have clean up your shit.
Yeah. So as part of this presentation at the seminar, I went through, some very, very specific things if you're in the personal training industry and what you want to do when you're considering selling. And we're not going to delve into all the nuances with, how you should structure it. But there's a few basic things that every business owner should do if they're considering selling or if they're considering just being a better business owner and figuring things out and really making their model efficient. And I titled this slide "Clean Up Your Shit" when I did it in the seminar, mostly because
It's
that's what
applicable
it
to
is.
all businesses, though. They all need to clean up their shit at some point.
I mean, when I go in and look at due diligence and everything's scattered and nothing makes sense, I'm pulling out my hair. And I've done this.
How many of those people have college degrees and backgrounds,
all of them, man.
and they literally have books that shitty?
He said pretty much all of them.
No,
man.
and you know what's sad?
All my sellers pretty much, I mean, I guess 50-50 college degrees, 50-50 not. But college degree is not an indicator of clean books. The best books I've ever seen was someone who didn't graduate college. The worst I've seen was someone who has a master's.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's like the whole thing. Like that blows me away when with how people with, I guess, a college degree, corporate eyes look at this. They would think that this is stupid, but to a small business person, someone who's like, "Hey, man, every little thing matters." This is like, what? You know what I mean? It's very interesting how they look at it.
What I see with people, so it's rare to see someone from corporate America actually buy business and get comfortable with the risk. I know we've beat this to death over the last few days, and you've heard this in our last 2 episodes. They just struggle with it. And then when they get into running the business, they get analysis paralysis. So they're pretty good about tracking everything because they're used to documenting everything in corporate America. Right. But then when it comes to actually going out and selling, when it comes to fulfilling the service, that's where they fall apart because they don't want to go out and sell. They're afraid to do that process, and they're just going to sit behind their computer and hope some emails get them there. They're going to hire some magic person who's going to make it better. And it's a shift. Whereas an entrepreneur, someone who truly has that spirit, knows I got to make this happen. Like when I left corporate America and I went into on my own, it was one way or another, I got to make this happen. I'm going to grind until I find, what I need to make this happen. That is the rarity. Most corporate America people don't have that. And so they come in with that emotional attachment to sitting in the C-suite. I don't know how else to explain it.
And then you have the people probably on the other side of it who they have the emotional attachment to their business is worth something that was so much sweat equity to them.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's only worth so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I say clean up your personal shit, this is a summary of everything we talked about. So get your personal expenses out of the business. I know, you're trying to hide income and do all that stuff where you pay less in taxes. And sure, talk to your accountant. Maybe they can figure out a way where you can owe less in taxes and put some personal things as business expenses. But when it all runs through the same bank account, no one knows what you're making. When people do due diligence, they see all those transactions in your bank account. It kills it. It kills you from really understanding what's going on as well. You can't implement profit first. You have all these stupid expenses for Amazon and everything else. What did your business make? I have no idea, but I have $2,000 in the bank account this month. Okay. That does no one any good. Next one is, like we talked about, software system, billing system. Find a way to not use Venmo or Cash App, these one-time transaction process. Try to automate so that it happens automatically. If your business isn't one that does that, find a way where you can accept that payment on site in the moment, ideally not Cash App or Venmo. They don't export well. Accountants do not enjoy it, and it gets too messy.
Yeah.
Another one, report all income. So if you collect $50,000 in cash and you go to sell your business and you say, look, I made this $50,000 in cash last year, we're going to say, great, that doesn't count. We're just taking your word for it. We can't prove that. You didn't report it to the IRS. It's not in your books. It's not going to count. You have to report that if you want the advantage. If you're going to take the cash and try and skirt the government, sure, go ahead. I'm not the IRS. I'm not here to tell you that you're a terrible person. I'm here to tell you that your benefit's going to be when you make that money with the business. It's not going to be when you sell it. So do not expect a huge return when you're doing stuff under the table, because that's not how the world works. Banks will not lend on that.
So you're talking about in those kind of cases, like for a loan or for a valuation of a business, when you're taking a bunch of cash, it's like, well, my business is worth X, but you're counting the cash that you have and you as the person that's evaluating it cannot count that. So that actually comes back to bite you quite a bit if you're doing it
does.
like that.
Yeah, a bank's not going to, SBA lending is
Right,
huge
if
in
you're
my industry. So if I say, hey, they made 50 grand in cash, they're going to say it's not on the books.
Yeah, great.
Where is
Who
it
cares?
verified?
Yeah.
It never hit the bank account.
Gotcha.
It never hit the tax form. So I'm just supposed to take their word. Like, when
I
has the
think-
government ever taken your word?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think like off the top of your head, you think, oh, that's good. Keep some cash off to the side. But you think,
Yeah.
well, that's until you go to get a proper evaluation of.
Yeah, and I'm also a believer in. I know Jeff hates taxes. Like, pay your fair share.
My whole thing with the taxes is I think they're great.
Yeah.
But the problem is it should be a flat tax.
Yeah, I
do
mean,
agree with
obviously
that.
the rich people don't pay taxes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You're good, keep going.
yeah. But that's a big thing. If you want to get the benefit when you go to sell a business, you got to report that income. Another one is, making sure all your contracts and agreements are up to date. You understand what they say. You understand what the fulfillment is. You understand the revenue. Because when you do that, you can predict future revenue. You know what's going to come in. You can predict those future expenses to a certain extent. You get the one-off business, but you have a really solid idea. And the other piece is when you actually sell, that's going to be one of the first things a buyer wants to see is what am I obligating myself to and what's guaranteed in the future. That's going to impact their decision very, very highly if they know there's $1 million coming in next year versus it's one-off business. So you hope it's coming in, but you have no idea. And then last one, is, we talked about data is king, document everything, track it. So, keep an email archive, keep a customer list, get a CRM, which is customer relationship management software. Get that, track all your customers, track all their emails, create an email list. When you have that information, you never know when you're going to use it, when it's going to be beneficial. And there is value to email lists. There's value to customer data to a buyer. When you're a seller, everything you can show that is organized, that gives them a base to go off of if they're trying to build new business, bring back old business, is going to increase your value. So Logan, Jeff, I know Jeff's heard this. Logan, I want to hear, what questions do you have?
I just had one just a second ago, and I was like, well, I'm not going to ask it. I mean, honestly, just saying from my perspective, for those who are listening, I have been in business for 5 or 6 years, but I am so over my head when it comes to this kind of stuff that I'm kind of sitting here spinning a little bit when it comes to a lot of it. I'm thinking a lot of the things that I either have done before wrong or that I want to do moving forward. And even like the CRM that you're talking about, there's through my bank, like with the invoicing and the payments and stuff, like it was very convenient for that. But like one reason why I didn't do it was how much it cost, because I didn't want to pass that cost along, right? So like there's been things that I've learned the whole time just thinking about it, and that was the question actually. So with podcasting, right, we do stuff like bulk episodes. If you need that how do you structure it to where like maybe that scenario isn't really meant to have like a set amount per month that's going to come in? It is going to come in at different times for different amounts. Like how do you set it up to still try to predict what you're going to make and what's going to come in if the nature of that agreement isn't necessarily like X amount per month?
Yeah, so you should have an idea, at least the timing. So maybe it's X amount per quarter or X amount per every 6 months.
Gotcha.
And then you need to be able to live in between those times and budget accordingly. So you have an idea, hey, it's once a quarter that this has come in. So these funds need to be spread out over this time frame to live off of. That comes down to personal budgeting. That's the biggest piece there. And, when you only have 4 or 5 clients, but they're really high level, maybe you don't need a CRM. You just need an Excel spreadsheet, and you say, all right, this is, client A, this is how much, they are charged. This is how many episodes we do. Did I invoice them? Yes. When did I invoice them? The date. Have they paid the invoice? Yes or no? And things like that you can build spreadsheets to do that you don't necessarily have to have a software. So I should take that back. I mean, Excel does work on a small level. Now, if you get to a high level where you do something like what Jeff's doing, if they tried to manage the gym in a spreadsheet, it wouldn't work. It's just impossible.
Just so many people. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the biggest takeaway I could tell everybody is this: business is tough. Okay?
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Understanding numbers is even tougher. I hated math. I was not good at it.
I hate it so much.
But I can tell you something. if you love to win and you hate to lose, understanding numbers tells you if you're a winner or loser in business.
That's a good point.
And I think there's nothing I'm going to be more proud of when I go to sell my business than I have an accurate representation of what it actually does that I could give to someone and say, this is why I think the value is what it is. In fact, I have all these bullets in these chambers loaded for you. So all you have to do is really turnkey it at that point. My goal is to give a turnkey operation over.
What can I just ask what that means? Because I've heard that term.
Basically, I mean, just it's like you just walk in and it's literally set to go. You literally run it.
Okay.
You have the staff in place. You might have a couple duties. It's overseeing payroll. It's hiring people.
Oh,
But the
turkey's
business,
like you just buy it and it's yours now, and
but
everything's set up.
the
You're good to
business is
go.
ready to go. Or sometimes you'll hear it in different contexts, but that's it. It's a well-oiled machine that you're stepping into, ready to go to make money.
And here's something I would give as a trickle down. The gym, I shared this with Robo. The gym industry grows. Gyms grow at a rate of 5% a year. Mine grew at 13.6 last year, and I've been doing it the last couple of years in a row. Some years higher than that, actually. And I wouldn't attribute it to anything else than having new visuals in my numbers because I'm able to stay ahead on cost. I'm able to predict things that don't catch me. And usually when you're an entrepreneur, when you can start really running, nothing takes you out of the race faster than a pothole that you don't see. And I can tell you that there have been a few, and they've been maybe a little spraying of the ankle rather than a whole snap.
Right.
And in business, if you're not, like Robo just gave you all a great presentation, a great overview of a lot of great things. But the one thing I could say is this: you actually have to show up and do this work. Mm-hmm. Okay. And if you just listen to this podcast, that sounds great. It sounds very complex. Business is probably not for you.
Right.
Okay. I'm just gonna be honest. I would even challenge you sitting here like, hey, how bad do you really want it?
Right.
Like, is it just kiddie dreams? And if it's a kiddie side project, treat it like a treehouse.
Yeah.
That's the difference between my old business partner and me before he passed away. He wanted a clubhouse. I wanted a fucking business.
Right.
You know what I mean? And this is right here, it's a business.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And you treat it like such. You should. And because guess what? When your employees ask you questions, it is what it is.
I think too earlier what you were talking about, if you have a business, you're a business owner. If you have a client, you have a business owner. Not to appeal more to like kind of the softer aspect of what we were just saying after what you just said, but I think sometimes too, like it's like, well, I don't need to do it. I'm not really doing anything. Like I think sometimes people at a small level think that they're like, well, I don't need like an accountant. Like I only have two freaking people I work with. And I think maybe that's kind of attitude too. And like, that's actually a kind of like a pat on the back kind of thing where it's like, listen, you are a business owner. Take it seriously like that.
And maybe, you have two clients, you made 10 grand last year. Maybe you don't need an accountant, but you sure as hell should track a P&L.
Yeah, right.
Because
exactly.
if you don't start that now, you never will.
Well, it's like if you don't take it seriously, they're not going to type thing.
Yep. And when you're organized, when you have that client, you send that professional invoice. You don't wait 60 days and then hit them up and be like, hey, you never paid me. Things like that, they matter. They show that you're professional, that you're committed. If Jeff was hitting me up, on the 14th of a month, rather than the first of the month to pay for that month, I'd be like, what happened to the other 2 weeks? Did I get those for free? It would just show he's unorganized, and I'd start to think that bleeds into more areas of his training.
And the last thing you want to do in business is give anyone a reason to doubt that your business can't make it.
Yeah. People take advantage of it. And it's when you're organized in one part of your business, it bleeds over to the others. It's kind of like when you're disorganized, in one part of your business, it bleeds over to the others. I think of it as when my bed isn't made, when my room's messy.
It's so funny you said that. I was just thinking about,
then,
Jordan Peterson.
Then it means my head's cluttered. Or if my house is dirty, it means my head's cluttered.
Yeah.
And it's insane.
But
when
work.
it's clean, I'm focused, I'm organized. Or like the desktop on your computer, when you have 700 different little damn icons, when you open it up, you probably got too much going on. You need to stop, reorganize how you're doing things and simplify it. Like if you look on mine, there's 6 icons for programs, 4 folders. That's all I have. That's all I use. And then it just takes me where I need to go. And God, I think so much more efficiently. Simple stuff like that. And we do that in our personal lives. We're like, we'll clean this, but then we won't fix our business. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, 100%. Well, man, I think this was probably like one of the most applicable ones we've done since we formed Syndicate. So thank you for presenting, because I know that was a long run. I'm sitting here like, man, in 5 years podcasting, I don't think anyone's actually run a show that I've been on the whole way through, top to bottom.
I don't think I've had to talk that much in
no,
a long time.
yeah. So I want to say
gosh.
thank you for doing that, but most importantly, thank you for sharing that because
for sure.
I mean, here's the deal. Go ahead and say the author's name again.
Mike Michalowicz.
Okay, so if you listen, Mike, we love you. Come on our podcast. But literally, we bring this up because there have been businesses like mine and others we know of that have done this, and it's really a great way to do a really great thing to do for your business. So hopefully, again, it delivered on the promise that was a strategic thing you could take away today and a tactical thing you can immediately do. But it's only going to do the work if you actually want to do the work. So thanks for sharing that. If you got any questions, comment below. More than happy to do a follow-up episode if we need to. Maybe y'all could tag the shit out of Mike and he'd come on, enjoy a bunch of misfits like us for a conversation.
We get no money from Mike. We don't get any benefit. We're just believers in his work.
That's like same thing with the books. Knowing those authors last episode paid us to talk about stuff that we actually felt were tangible for business owners. So that's all we're trying to give you guys. Any of the money that we would get from this, we'd put it back into the show. And secondly, we want to do stuff with like business scholarships and other stuff that Robo and I and Scoob have talked about. But if you guys like this, share us. We can be found on Instagram, ATG Syndicate, right? Is what it is, ATG_Syndicate. We are ATG_Syndicate on YouTube. You guys are seeing. I'm Jeff Unbreakable Black on Instagram. A website, brittle2unbreakable.com. I put a lot of content out there if you're interested. And then Robo, where they can find you and connect with you if they're interested.
I vaguely remember having an Instagram under Jason Robo 08. 2 posts a year. It's super exciting. Check them out. They're impressive.
But here's the thing. If you want him to look over your books, he's not available for consultation. You have to have a business worth $5 million. You don't want to fuck around and find out. With that being said, guys, thanks. Share it. We appreciate you all as always. Take care.